In the sprawling urban landscape of New Haven City, darkness enveloped the streets, creeping through alleyways and filling the air with an unsettling tension. The glow of neon lights flickered, casting distorted shadows on the faces of passers-by who hurried along, wary of the increasing criminal activity that had gripped their lives. Once a bustling metropolis, the city now felt like a ticking time bomb, with gangs of superpowered criminals roving freely, their enhanced abilities making the police feel like mere spectators in a game of chaos. Officer Li Wei stood in the middle of a chaotic scene, surveying the aftermath of a recent gang skirmish. Debris littered the ground, and the echoes of gunfire still rang in his ears. He was a dedicated cop, but with every day that passed, he felt the weight of inadequacy pressing down on him. His colleagues, seasoned veterans of the force, shared glances of frustration and despair. They were outmatched, outgunned, and increasingly fearful of what lay ahead. It was on one such bleak night that Li Wei received a summons from his superiors. In a dimly lit conference room, he learned of a clandestine program, Project Genesis, designed to enhance police capabilities using cutting-edge genetic modification. Skepticism washed over him, but desperation for change fueled his acceptance. He was injected with a serum that promised superhuman abilities. As the cold fluid coursed through his veins, a sense of trepidation mingled with hope. Days passed, and Li Wei found himself grappling with the enormity of his transformation. During training, he discovered his reflexes had sharpened, his strength magnified. He could now dodge bullets and leap across rooftops with ease. However, each exhilarating experience brought with it an unsettling realization: he was no longer just an officer, he was something more, and that came with its own set of ethical dilemmas. He was no longer just fighting crime, he was becoming a part of it. Tension simmered within the precinct. Some officers eyed him with envy, others with fear. Among them was his mentor, Officer Zhang, a grizzled veteran who had seen it all. Zhang was wary of Li Wei's enhancements, fearing that power could corrupt even the noblest intentions. Despite their differences, an unspoken bond held them together, a shared commitment to the safety of their city. One evening, while patrolling the streets, Li Wei received a call about a gang ambush in progress. As he raced to the scene, adrenaline surged through him. He arrived just in time to see the Red Fangs, one of the most feared gangs, engaged in a brutal skirmish. With his enhanced abilities, he sprang into action, dodging bullets and disarming criminals with a speed that left onlookers in awe. The battle was fierce, and despite his prowess, the chaos left him rattled. He caught a glimpse of a familiar face in the fray, one of his childhood friends, now turned criminal. After the confrontation, as Li Wei processed what he had witnessed, his thoughts drifted to the deeper issues plaguing their city. He began investigating the rise of enhanced criminals, uncovering a sinister connection to the very corporation behind Project Genesis. The corporation, he learned, was not only experimenting with police enhancements but was also providing similar enhancements to criminals, manipulating both sides for profit and control. In his quest for answers, Li Wei reached out to Zhang Mei, an underground journalist whose reports had exposed the corporation's dark dealings. Their partnership blossomed, fueled by a shared determination to unveil the truth. Mei's fierce spirit and relentless drive resonated with Li Wei, igniting a spark of hope amidst the chaos. Together, they dug deeper into the corporation's operations, uncovering evidence of illegal genetic experiments conducted in hidden labs throughout the city. As their investigation unfolded, Li Wei faced moral conflicts. The power he had gained came at a cost, one that blurred the lines between hero and villain. He witnessed firsthand the consequences of his actions, how the city had become a battleground for those wielding power recklessly. And yet, in the quiet moments, he found himself drawn to May, their connection growing as they faced danger together. The night of reckoning arrived when they discovered a major deal taking place, a transaction that would turn the tide of power in the city. With evidence in hand, they infiltrated the corporation's headquarters, a towering structure looming over the city like a sentinel. The air was thick with tension as they navigated through security systems, their hearts racing with each step, but danger lurked around every corner. As they reached the main lab, they were met with resistance, corporate agents and enhanced criminals ready to protect their empire. A fierce battle erupted, the sound of fists meeting flesh and the crackle of energy filling the air. Li Wei's abilities surged, allowing him to fight with a ferocity that shocked even himself. But as he unleashed his power, he struggled with the realization of what he had become. In the midst of the chaos, he spotted Zhang, who had come to back him up, but was quickly overwhelmed. A split-second decision hung heavy in the air. Li Wei could save his mentor or capture the lead criminal responsible for the corporation's abuses. With anguish clawing at his heart, he chose to save Zhang, making a desperate leap across the room, pulling him out of harm's way. The moment left him vulnerable, and in the fray, the lead criminal escaped, their plan foiled. But the fight far from over, the aftermath of the battle was bittersweet. The corporation's operations were exposed, but the damage had been done. Li Wei returned to the precinct, greeted with a mix of admiration and distrust from his colleagues. Zhang's injury weighed heavily on him, a constant reminder of the risks they faced. The public demanded answers, and as the dust settled, Li Wei found himself at a crossroads. With Mei by his side, he dedicated himself to rebuilding trust within the force. He advocated for responsible use of enhanced abilities, emphasizing the importance of ethics in law enforcement. The city began to heal, but the scars of the past lingered. Li Wei recognized that while he had gained power, the true strength lay in his commitment to protect his community, not just through might but through integrity and justice. As he stood on a rooftop overlooking New Haven City, the sun setting behind the skyline, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was a cop, an officer of the law, and while the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, he was determined to walk it with honor. With Mei beside him, the future held the promise of change, a beacon of hope amidst the lingering shadows. In a world where power could corrupt, Li Wei chose to fight for a brighter tomorrow, one where humanity reigned supreme over superhumanity. Under the fading light of the setting sun, Li Wei stood tall on the rooftop, the city sprawling beneath him like a living organism, pulsating with life, chaos, and a yearning for redemption. His heart still raced from the events of the night before. Zhang's injury had not just been a physical blow, it had shaken the foundation of his resolve. He had chosen to save his mentor, but the cost of that decision haunted him. The criminal mastermind had slipped through their fingers, and the thought gnawed at him. What if that choice had cost them everything? Li Wei turned away from the ledge, pulling himself back to the present. He had a city to protect and citizens to reassure. The precinct buzzed with activity as he stepped inside, his fellow officers exchanging wary glances. Whispers of his recent exploits filled the air, a mix of admiration and apprehension. Some regarded him as a beacon of hope, while others viewed him as a dangerous anomaly, a cop with powers that could just as easily lead to tyranny. Officer Li, came a voice from behind. It was Captain Liu, the precinct head, his face stern yet thoughtful. "We need to talk about the fallout from last night." "Captain," Li Wei replied, his voice steady. "I know I let the lead criminal slip away, but we exposed their operations. We can build on that." Liu sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "That's true, but the public is restless. They don't understand what's happening, and fear is spreading. We need a plan, something that reassures them we're still in control." Li Wei nodded, the weight of responsibility settling heavily on his shoulders. We should hold a press conference. Share the information we've gathered. Let them know we're taking action against the corporation. Do you think that's wise? Lu asked, skepticism etched on his features. Your enhancements make you a target, and the corporation won't take this lying down. They'll come after me anyway, Li Wei replied, determination igniting his voice. But if we're transparent, if we show them we're not afraid to confront the truth, we might just regain their trust. Captain Lu considered this, then gave a reluctant nod. Fine. But you'll have to tread carefully. You're not just representing yourself anymore, you're the face of the department. As Li Wei prepared for the press conference, he felt the familiar rush of adrenaline mingling with anxiety. Zhang Mei joined him in the briefing room, her expression a mixture of admiration and concern. You're really going to do this? She asked, her brow furrowed. I have to, he replied. It's the only way to regain control of the narrative. Just remember, she cautioned, they'll scrutinize every word you say. You need to be careful. The corporation is watching, and they won't hesitate to strike back. I know, he said, meeting her gaze. But I can't let fear dictate our actions. This city deserves to know the truth. As the time approached, Li Wei felt the weight of expectation pressing down on him. The room filled with reporters, their cameras flashing like fireflies in the dusk. He stood at the podium, the bright lights blinding him momentarily. Clearing his throat, he began, Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today. I'm Officer Li Wei, and I want to talk to you about the challenges our city faces and the steps we're taking to address them. He outlined the events that had transpired, emphasizing the corporation's role in the rise of superpowered crime. He spoke of the ongoing investigation, of the need for community involvement and vigilance. As he spoke, he could see the faces in the audience shift from skepticism to engagement. The tide was turning, however, as he concluded his remarks, a familiar tension crackled in the air. The moment he stepped down from the podium, the atmosphere shifted again, and he sensed danger. Reporters surged toward him, questions flying, cameras flashing, but he noticed something, a figure lurking at the edge of the crowd, shadowy and intent. Li. Zhang Mei called, cutting through the chaos. Look out! Instinctively, Li Wei turned, his enhanced reflexes kicking in. A figure lunged from the shadows, a weapon glinting in their hand. In an instant, Li dove forward, tackling the assailant to the ground. The two rolled, fists exchanging blows, the crowd gasping as they watched the spectacle unfold. Stop! Police, he shouted, his voice cutting through the noise. With a surge of strength, he pinned the assailant down, wrenching the weapon away. As he stood, adrenaline coursing through him, he recognized the man, one of the criminals from the Red Fangs. Get back! Li yelled to the reporters, who had drawn dangerously close. The crowd began to scatter, panic spreading like wildfire. Zhang Mei rushed to his side, her expression fierce. Is it him? The one who got away? Li studied the man beneath him, breathing heavily. No, but he's connected. We need to interrogate him. Within moments, officers flooded the scene, subduing the chaos. Li and Mei watched as the assailant was taken away, a mixture of triumph and frustration swirling in Li's gut. They had caught a piece of the puzzle, but the mastermind still eluded them. In the following days, the city buzzed with the fallout from the attempted attack. Li Wei became a household name, the face of the fight against the rising tide of enhanced crime. But with that fame came scrutiny. Every move he made was analyzed, every decision questioned. The pressure was mounting, but he remained steadfast, fueled by a sense of duty to protect his city. As investigations continued, Lee and May worked tirelessly to piece together the threads of the corporation's network. They scoured through files, connecting dots that led them deeper into a labyrinth of corruption. Each discovery brought new dangers. The corporation had eyes everywhere, and soon, Lee began to receive threats, anonymous messages warning him to back off or face the consequences, yet he pressed on, determined not to let fear dictate his actions. One night, while poring over documents in the precinct, he stumbled upon a hidden report detailing an upcoming meeting between the corporation's leaders and their criminal associates. It was a chance, a potential strike against the heart of the operation. May, he said, excitement and urgency rising within him. This could be our shot. If we can get evidence of this meeting, we can expose them all. Are you sure it's safe? She asked, concern flickering in her eyes. They'll be on high alert after what happened at the conference. We have to try, he insisted. I can handle myself. With May at his side, they devised a plan to infiltrate the meeting. Disguised and armed with hidden cameras, they positioned themselves outside a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The night air was thick with tension as they waited, hearts pounding in sync with the ticking clock. Hours passed before the first figures arrived, their silhouettes casting long shadows under the dim lights. Lee's breath quickened as he recognized the faces of both the corporate executives and the enhanced criminals. The meeting was more critical than they had anticipated, discussing not just deals but the future of crime in New Haven City. As the discussion intensified, Lee whispered to May, "We need to get closer. We can't miss a word of this." Stealthily, they moved through the shadows, inching closer to the entrance. But just as they were about to break into the open, a sound shattered the stillness, a door creaking, footsteps approaching. "Get down," Lee hissed, pulling May behind a stack of crates. They held their breath, hearts racing as the figures passed, unaware of their presence. In that moment of tension, Lee felt the weight of his choices. Every decision had led him here, to this precipice of danger and truth. He glanced at May, who met his gaze, her expression unwavering. They were in this together. Once the coast was clear, they crept closer, settling behind a wall where they could hear every word. The conversation was dark and twisted, detailing plans for a city-wide takeover using enhanced criminals as pawns. Lee's blood ran cold as he realized the magnitude of the threat they were facing. Just as he prepared to record, a sudden crash echoed through the warehouse. The door burst open, and armed agents flooded in, brandishing weapons and barking orders. The meeting had been a trap, Lee. May shouted, panic flooding her voice. "We have to go." With adrenaline surging, they sprinted back, the chaos unfolding behind them as shots rang out. Lee's instincts kicked in, and he maneuvered through the debris, shielding May as they darted toward the exit. Just as they reached safety, a bullet whizzed past, grazing Lee's arm. He winced but pressed on, the fire of determination burning brighter. Outside, they didn't stop running until they reached the safety of their vehicle. As they sped away, Lee glanced at May, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and exhilaration. "That was insane," she exclaimed, breathless. "We could have been killed." "But we got the evidence," Lee replied, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "Now we can expose them for good." Over the following days, they worked tirelessly to compile the footage and testimonies from their narrow escape. With each passing moment, the gravity of their discoveries settled in. The corporation was deeply entrenched, and it would take everything they had to bring it down. Finally, they called a press conference, but this time, it was different. They had tangible evidence, a clear narrative that painted the corporation as the true villain in the story of New Haven City. As Lee stood before the crowd once more, he felt the weight of the moment, a chance to finally reclaim the city from the shadows that had gripped it for too long. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice strong and unwavering. "Today, we stand at a crossroads. The fight against crime has become a fight against corruption, a battle not just for our city's safety, but for its very soul." He detailed the evidence, the connections, the plans that had been laid bare before the public. The crowd listened, rapt, the fear in their eyes slowly transforming into resolve. As he spoke of unity and the power of community, he could feel the shift, a tide turning as the citizens began to reclaim their narrative. When the conference concluded, the atmosphere crackled with energy. Li Wei and Mei were approached by a wave of support, citizens thanking them for their bravery and commitment. For the first time in a long time, Li felt a glimmer of hope, but the calm was short-lived. That night, as Li returned home, he noticed a figure lurking outside his apartment building. Tension surged as he stepped cautiously toward the entrance, heart pounding. The figure turned, and Li's blood ran cold. It was the lead criminal, the one who had escaped their grasp time and time again. "You think you can expose us?" the man sneered, his voice low and menacing. "You've only just begun to understand the power you're dealing with." Before Li could react, the criminal lunged, and a brutal fight erupted on the dimly lit street. Li's instincts kicked in, but the criminal was faster, stronger, fueled by desperation. They exchanged blows, the sounds of the scuffle echoing through the night, but Li was determined not to lose this fight. Channeling his enhanced abilities, he fought back with ferocity, the weight of his mission propelling him forward. Each punch, each movement, was a testament to his commitment to protect the city he loved. As the battle raged on, Li finally gained the upper hand, pinning the criminal against the ground. "You're done," he gasped, adrenaline pumping through his veins. The man glared up at him, fury and desperation in his eyes. "You have no idea what you're up against. You may win this battle, but the war is far from over." With that, Li cuffed him, breathing heavily as he took in the gravity of the moment. The criminal was finally in custody, but the fight against the corporation was far from over. He knew this was just a small victory in a larger war. In the following weeks, the tides shifted even further. With the criminal in custody and the evidence out in the open, public outcry grew against the corporation. Protests erupted, demanding accountability and justice. Li watched as the citizens banded together, united in their determination to reclaim their city. As the investigation unfolded, the corporation's corrupt leaders were brought to light, their grip on the city weakening. The battle had ignited a fire within the community, one that Li had hoped for but hadn't dared to believe could manifest so quickly. Yet, with each step forward, he remained acutely aware of the dangers that lurked just out of sight. One evening, while working late at the precinct, Li received a call from Mei. "We need to meet." "There's something you need to see," she said, urgency lacing her tone. When they met, she handed him a folder filled with documents. "I've been digging deeper. There are more players involved than we realized. The corporation has connections that run deep." Li's brow furrowed as he scanned the pages. "This goes beyond just the local gang scene. We're talking organized crime on a much larger scale." "Exactly," Mei said, determination shining in her eyes. "We can't let this slide. If we want to protect the city, we have to take them down completely." With renewed vigor, they set a plan into motion, reaching out to trusted allies within the department and the community. They needed to gather evidence and rally support, preparing for a fight that would test every ounce of their resolve. As the days turned into weeks, Lee and May led the charge, navigating a treacherous landscape filled with deceit and danger. They held community meetings, engaging citizens and empowering them to take a stand. As momentum grew, so did the corporation's desperation. Threats began to surface, warnings aimed at Lee, at May, and at their families. Despite the risks, they pressed on, the belief that change was possible igniting their spirits. The city was ready to rise, and together they would reclaim it. On a rainy evening, Lee and May sat in a small diner, strategizing over coffee. Outside, the storm raged, mirroring the turmoil brewing within their hearts. "This is it, isn't it?" May said softly, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "We're close to a breaking point." "Yeah," Lee replied, staring out at the downpour. "But we have to be careful. We can't underestimate them." Just then, a commotion erupted outside. Lee's instincts flared, and he leaped to his feet, pushing through the door. The rain drummed against him as he surveyed the scene. A group of citizens had gathered, their faces twisted in fear. In the middle of the street, a flash of movement caught his eye. Before he could process it, he saw figures emerging from the shadows, armed men, faces obscured by masks. "They were here to send a message, Lee," May shouted, rushing to his side. "We have to get out of here." But Lee's resolve hardened. "No. We stand our ground." As the masked men advanced, Lee's adrenaline surged. "Everyone, get to safety," he yelled, positioning himself protectively in front of May. The crowd dispersed, panic spreading, but he wouldn't back down. The first assailant lunged, and Lee dodged with reflexes that felt almost second nature. He retaliated, landing a solid punch that sent the attacker staggering back. But the odds were against him, and soon he found himself surrounded. May joined him, fighting fiercely by his side. Together, they were a whirlwind of energy, deflecting blows and striking back with precision. Yet, as they pushed back, it became clear that they were outnumbered. The attackers were relentless, driven by a fearsome determination to silence them. Just when it seemed they were about to be overwhelmed, the sirens wailed in the distance. Reinforcements arrived, officers spilling onto the street. The attackers hesitated, their resolve faltering as they turned to flee. "Don't let them get away," Lee shouted, adrenaline fueling his every move. He took off after one of the fleeing figures, determined to capture at least one of them. In the chaos, he felt the familiar rush of purpose. He could feel the tide shifting. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for the future of New Haven City. With every encounter, every victory, they were gaining ground. Lee and May continued to work together, forging a path toward change. They became symbols of resilience, hope, and unity, inspiring citizens to take a stand against the darkness that threatened to engulf them. As the final confrontation loomed closer, Lee felt a sense of clarity settling over him. He understood now that power could be both a weapon and a shield, and it was his responsibility to wield it wisely. The fight against the corporation and the crime syndicate would require more than just strength. It would take courage, collaboration, and an unyielding belief in justice. In a final meeting with the precinct, they gathered their allies and strategized for the impending confrontation. "This is our chance," Lee addressed them, the room buzzing with energy. "If we expose their connections and take them down, we can bring true justice back to this city." With a plan in place, they set out to confront the corporation one last time. The air was thick with anticipation as they gathered outside the corporate headquarters, a massive building that had loomed over the city for far too long. Citizens stood shoulder to shoulder with officers, united in their determination. As they stormed the building, the atmosphere crackled with resolve. Li led the charge, bolstered by the support of his fellow officers and the citizens who had come to reclaim their city. Every step was a testament to their journey, the struggles, the sacrifices, the unwavering belief that they could overcome the darkness. Inside, they faced off against the corporation's leaders and the enhanced criminals they had once feared. The battle was fierce, each punch thrown a statement of defiance against the corruption that had held them captive for too long. But with every blow, they also fought against the doubts that had once plagued Li, about his powers, his choices, and his place in this fight. As the dust settled and the last remnants of resistance crumbled, Li stood at the center of the chaos, breathless and victorious. They had done it. They had dismantled the corporation's hold on their city. As the sun began to rise, casting a golden light over New Haven City, Li felt a wave of hope wash over him. The city was far from perfect, but it was a beginning, a chance to rebuild, to redefine what it meant to be a community. He glanced at May, who stood beside him, her eyes sparkling with pride and determination. "We did it," she said, disbelief mingled with joy. "Yeah, we did," Li replied, a smile breaking through the exhaustion. "And this is just the start." Together, they looked out over the city, a place filled with promise, resilience, and the undeniable spirit of its people. The fight had forged them into something greater, a bond that would carry them through whatever challenges lay ahead. With unity and courage, they would continue to protect New Haven City, embracing the power they had both gained and the responsibility that came with it. As the dawn broke, Li knew that while darkness might still linger, light had begun to shine through. The city was alive with possibility, and he was ready to face whatever came next.